Hi everyone, I'm Ellie from Code of the Future, and today we're going to be learning about lists in Python. So we're going to jump straight into the video, and I'm going to put my glasses on as usual and move you onto the screen. As you can see, I've already created a folder here that just says PyCharm, and we've created a file within this folder called lists. Obviously, if you've watched my previous videos, then you'll know exactly how to do that, how to get your basic setup in Python. So the first thing we're going to do is just show you how to create a very basic list. So as mentioned in my previous video, where I talk about assigning variables, so we're going to assign the list that we want to a specific variable. So I'm just going to call that my list, and we're going to make it equals to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. So this list just has 6 elements in it: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Again, this could be something as simple as, you know, you have 6 individuals and this is telling you how many pairs of shoes the individual owns. So one person may own 1 pair of shoes and someone else may own 6 pairs of shoes. Just for the basic of this video, we're keeping it very simple, just with the 1 to 6. Okay, so this is one way of creating a list. But you might think, well, what if I want a really long list? You know, I want 1 to 100. I'm going to be sat there ages trying to write 1 to 100 in a list. And the way that you overcome that is by using the command range. Now I'm just going to show you what range does by just typing something into here. So we're going to just assign a new list. We're going to call it my list 2. I could, for the ease of it, call this my list 1, just so then you know the difference between the two. Again, you could just create this can just be A if you want it to be A, but just for the ease of this video, I'm just going to keep reiterating that these are lists. I always find that when you assign variables, it's a lot easier to assign them to something very specific. So if you were to write A, then maybe if you were to do some later complicated calculations, then A may not, you may not remember what A was in this sense, but my list 1, you can remember, oh, that's the first list I wrote. Okay, so say you want a list from 1 to 10. We're just going to keep it quite simple for now, just so we don't have this really long list. We're just going to type my list 2 equals, now we're going to write list and a bracket. Now what you'll notice as soon as I do that is this list turns purple, and if you remember from previous videos, when you write the print command, it turns purple as well. So what this is saying is my list 2 equals a list. At the moment there's nothing in it. Okay, so what you'll notice is this isn't doing anything. We haven't decided to print or anything. I'm just going to show you what the range command does. So we're just going to type in range, and as you can, I suppose, infer from the title, from the name of this, is it's going to do a range of integers. So let's say we want it from 0 to 6, or let's do 1 to 6. Because intuitively, if we want it to be the same as this, you'd think, well, let's just put range 1 to 6. Now let me just explain what this is doing. So we have my list 2, which is the variable, equaled to list. Now this list is creating a list from the range of integers from 1 to 5. And I'm going to say that again, to 5. The way that the range command works is it takes the range of numbers from 1 to this final number minus 1. So I'll show you what happens when I decide to print both of these. So we're just going to print my list 1 and print my list 2. Now this is what I love about PyCharm, is that if you were to write a really long variable, it remembers it here. So you can just, you know, click my list 2, double click it, and we're just going to click run. Now see what happens. The first one, which is what we've assigned, we can see it here, is right there, perfect. Now this one takes the list, creates a list of integers in the range 1 to 5. Now that's something to remember about the range command, is that it chooses to go from this integer up to this integer minus 1. So if I was to change this to 7 and click run, perfect, they're both the same. Now that's just something that you need to keep in mind if you are creating a list. So say if I was to create a list of from 1 to 100, let's do that. If you were to do 100, what you'll notice is when I click run, obviously this is a very long list, so we're just going to scroll all the way to the end. The last integer is 99. So if I now change that to 101 and we click run and we scroll all the way to the end, it's 100. Perfect. So that's just kind of giving you an insight into what the range command does and how you need to use it, but use it carefully, because it does go from this integer to this integer minus 1. That's just something to reiterate. Another thing about the range command, which I really love, is that you can actually add an extra argument. Now what I mean by an argument is these are arguments here. So this has 2 arguments. And what you'll notice is that, say if I put too many arguments in here, say I do 5 and then 10, and I click run, what you'll notice here is it comes up with range expected at most 3 arguments, got 4. So an argument is just basically what you input into these 2 brackets here. Okay, now that's applicable if it is a function like the range. So what that's saying is, at most there must be 3 arguments within this range function. So I've added an extra 1, and Python doesn't like that because it can't do anything with it. It's saying I can't, there's 4 arguments in here, I can't, at most I must have 3. So we're just going to get rid of 10, and we're just going to change this last argument to 10 instead of 5, just to show you what happens. So I'm just going to click run, and what you'll notice is we have from 1 to 100. Now just observe what this extra 10 here does. I'm going to click run. Oh. So it's not a list from 1 to 100. It's a list that starts at 1, increases by 10, as can be seen here, with the maximum value of 100. So you might think, well, why is 100 not in here? And that's because we've started at 1 and incremented the step by 10 each time, and obviously 100 is not in that step. If I was to say change this to 102, and just to tidy up my code here because we have a bit of an error under here, which is going to make this look a little bit neater. Python just gives you these little underlines when it's like, whoa, we don't like the setup of that. It just completely depends on how you code. We're going to change that to 102, and remember that is now going to go up to 101. The maximum is 101. So we're just going to click run again. Now notice 101 is included in this list. So essentially what this is doing is it's creating a list, as can be seen here, from the range of integers that begin at 1, increment each time by 10, so move up each time by 10, so add 10, add 10, add 10, until it gets to 101. So again, if I was to move that to 101, that would subsequently mean it would be up to 100. And so 100 is not included in this. So this is what's quite kind of cool. You can do something crazy, like you can say, oh, let's have 1009. Go crazy. I mean, that's not really crazy. And you can say, well, I want to start at 1, but I want to go up each step by, let's say, 178. Crazy number. Not really that crazy, but pretty crazy when you start doing things in Python. So what you'll notice is it just goes up each time, you know, 179, 357, and that's kind of what's cool about when you start, you know, creating these lists, is you can create some pretty crazy lists. If you're completely new to Python and you don't really have any purpose to be creating lists, you know, you're not doing it for any particular purpose other than just to learn how to code, then experiment with this. I guarantee you'll be able to produce some pretty cool lists, if lists are cool. But anyway, so we're just gonna click run again. That's what it produces. So quite simply here we have just created a simple list by just doing brackets. Now what I forgot to mention to start with is lists must be in square brackets. So let's say I change this to these types of brackets, just normal brackets, and I then go down here and I say, well, I'd like to know what type my list is. Now this just means it's going to tell you whether it's a float or an integer. So if my list 1 just equaled 1, then it'll tell you it's an integer. Now what I'm just going to show you is, I'm just going to run this command. Doesn't tell me what type it is. That's because I haven't put print. Remember from my first video, you must put print in order for Python to run things. Here, it says a tuple. However, if I then change this back to square brackets, what you'll notice is, when I click run, list. So ideally when you start doing things in Python and in lists, the class must be a list. Again, I can change that to my list 2 and see if my list 2 is a list. We already know it is. Yep, a list. That's just something worth saying, is that you must put them in square brackets. And also here with this command, Python is creating a list, and Python knows to put it in square brackets, which is why there's always this safety net with this, is that you definitely know it's going to be a square bracket. One final thing I'll just say about range is that unfortunately you can't do things like this. 0.1. I'm just going to get rid of the type. Just going to run this. Here, float object cannot be interpreted as an integer. That's because this is a float, just got a decimal 0.1 and not an integer, because a range function only works with integers. So this is the very basic, you know, how to create a list, the explanation of what range is, and then how to create a list a different way. So we're just going to keep that up there for now, and we can, you know, keep this print in. Now what I'm going to show you is the things that you can do with lists. So for the sake of this video, I'm just going to comment out this list here, because we don't really want this list. We're just going to use a very simple list, and again I'm just going to comment out print my list. In fact, yeah, we're just going to do that, and we're going to just move this all the way up here. So we're going to print this list. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to perform some operations on lists here. So we have my list defined up above, and we're just going to manipulate this variable and see what kind of things we can do with this. So one of the first things I'm going to show you is how you get an element from within a list, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So we have my list, which I'm just going to click enter, and if you use square brackets and input a number, let's say 2. Now remember, we've got to print this before for Python to actually recall what it wants to print this actual thing here. Just going to put some spaces in there to get rid of the error. So we're going to print my list and just do some square brackets, and we're just going to see what this does. Okay. Aha. So it's printed this because we've asked it to, and here it's printed 3. Now if you look, 3 is actually the third element in the list. So what this is doing here is it's saying, take my list, so that's the list, and then give me the second element within that list. Now you might think, well, here 3 is the third element in that list. Now I'm just going to show you something. If I was to change this to 0, click run, 1, it gives you 1, which is the first element in the list. So this is what you need to be careful of when you're trying to retrieve a specific element from a list. It always begins from 0, which takes a bit of time to get your head around. I know it's a bit confusing at times. However, this is how this works. So 0 gives you the first element, 1 will give you the second, 2 will give you the third, and so on. So you might think, well, okay, so if I was to put 5 in here, that will give me 5 plus 1 is 6. It will give me the 6th element. It should return 6, and let's see what happens. Perfect, it returns 6. You might be thinking, well, what happens if I put 6? That will give me the 7th element. But wait a second, we don't have a 7th element. So if you click run, list index out of range. And that's basically saying that you have put in an index in here that does not match to any index in here. So just a piece of advice is, say if you know that you have 6 numbers in a list, the maximum you can put in here is 5. So if you have n numbers, then it's n minus 1. So again, let's just do 5, which should give you 5 plus 1 is 6. 6th element, 6. Perfect. Another really interesting thing I quite like to show you is that, let's just copy this. I'm just going to do it down here again. So here we're using positive integers, so 0 will give you 1, 1 will give you 2, and so on and so forth. Now what happens if I was to put minus 1? Go back from 0 and go back. Let's just see what happens. 6. Now this is what I find really good about Python, is that if you have a list and you're thinking, okay, I don't know how many elements are in this list, but I want to find the last, you can go minus 1. I just think it's pretty cool. It just means that you can, you know that 0 is the first element, so minus 1 must take you all the way back to the list and give you the final one. So again, if I was to put minus 2 in here and click go, gives you 5. If I were to do -3, so this is the third last element in a sense, gives you 4. So again, 1, 2, 3. And this is quite nice because it works in a reverse process in the sense that -1 is the last element, -2 is the second last element, -3 is the third last element. So there's no complication of here where you have to minus a number. So I'm just going to write some comments in here just so you know what I'm doing. So this returns the 5th element in the list. The 5th element starting from the 0th element. So it depends on how you work. This is how I would say, because now I know that the 0th element is this one. This is just how I work. So what I'm going to do for you is just say it's the 6th element, just if you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, where we begin at the 1st element. That might not, that's just basically saying that we begin at the 1st and then it will give you the 6th. Or equally, you can just put the 5th element where we begin at the 0th element. But just for the ease of how, when I first started learning, that's how I learned, was that it was the 6th element, but we must remember that begins at the 1st element, if that makes sense. Okay, and then this one here, this returns the last element in the list. Okay, so now we're just going to show you how to create a slice. So let's create a slice. I'm just going to move this down so you can see what I'm doing. So let's say we want it from the 2nd element. Again, I'm starting as if this one here is the 1st element. So let's say we want to slice from the 2nd element to the 4th element. So let's create a slice from 2nd element to the 4th element. So we're just going to copy this. And what you're going to do is, remember we want it from the 2nd element. Okay. Now we have to apply the same rule that we did here. So we want the 2nd element, therefore we must put 1 in here. Now, like I said about the element, is that I'm counting as if this is the 1st element, this is the 2nd, and this is the 3rd. This is just the way that I learned it when I first began learning, and it's the best way to pick up on it. So from the 2nd element, I mean this is the 2nd element. So remember what we did in this section, we need to then -1, because not forgetting that 0 corresponds to the 1st element and 1 corresponds to the 2nd element. Now you're going to put a colon. Now we want the 4th element. So we want it from 1, 2, 3. So you might think, well, let's put here 3. Now this is creating a slice. Now, unfortunately, just to complicate things a little bit more, it doesn't take into account this final element here. So what I'll show you is that when you run this command, it will only produce 1, 2, which corresponds to the 2nd element and the 3rd element, which is why we have 2, 3. So we just need to add 1 onto this. This is just the way that Python works. It's kind of similar to the range command, how you had to add 1 at the end. And again, this may seem very complicated at the moment, but if you just keep practicing and doing more, slices into your list, then it will all become very clear. So I just ran that command, and here we have the 2, 3, 4. Perfect. Again, say I want to go from 3, 4, 5. So 3 will correspond to 2, because 2 corresponds to the 3rd element. And we want 5, so we're going to go up to 5, because although 5 corresponds to the 6th element, it will not include the 6th element. So we're just going to click run, and perfect, we have 3, 4, 5. Again, just have a play around with this. It takes a bit of getting used to with this slicing, but it's perfect. Say if you have a list and you're thinking, well, I want the first 10, then you can slice the first 10, or say you want the last 10, you can slice the last 10, or if you want straight in the middle, or certain elements you want within that list, then you can do it this way. And I think, honestly, I love this, especially when it comes to a bit of data analysis. It makes things a lot easier. So another thing I'm just going to show you is how to get the length of a list. And this is very, very simple. Again, we're just going to put the print command because we need to print it. I'm going to put len of my list 1. I'm just going to click run, and perfect. It gives you, there are 6 elements within this list, which again, as you see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 if I was to change that to 7, add a 7 on the end, and we click run again, it will change to 7. So it's just telling you exactly how many elements are in a list, and that's perfect again for data analysis. If you have this whole long list of students' shoe size or things like that, then you can click length of my list and you can find out exactly how many students are in that class. So the length is a really good command. I like using that. So that's very, very straightforward. So that's how you use the length of a list. I'm just going to move this bit over this way. I just realised that I'm not showing you too much on here. Now we can show you how to get the maximum and minimum of a list, and again that's very, very simple. We're just going to choose the print command and you're going to put max of my list. Again, just press enter and we're going to click run, and it tells you here that the max is 6. Again, if you want to do min, so I'm just going to copy all of this, saves typing it out, and we're just going to change max to min. Now notice when you do length, max and min, they turn purple because that is a function. So that's recalling a function that's already built in within Python. So we just click run. There we go. Minimum element of my list is 1. Just like if I was to change that to a -1 and we click run, it tells you the minimum element is -1. Or we were to change that to -3, click run. Now it tells you it's -3. And by maximum and minimum, it doesn't mean this is the minimum, that's the maximum. It means the maximum number in that list, so the highest number and the minimum number in that list. So that's why it recalled the -3 here. Now we're just going to change that back to the way that it was to start with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and run, and it tells you 1. So that's how you do the maximum and minimum of a list. Again, that's perfect if you have students' shoe size and you want to know who has the biggest shoe size, who has the littlest shoe size. Again, if you are very new to Python, you can see how great Python is for data analysis and statistics. So that's how you do maximum and minimum. Now we're going to add an element onto our list. So like I did earlier when I just added a 7 onto here, that is a way of adding on a new element. But say you have this really, really long list and you don't have it printed out up here like this, and you just simply want to add a number. The way that you're going to do that is, so we're going to say my list, which is the list that we have to find. Oh, see, I forgot to do the underscore. Here it tells me this is my list. So my list 1. Now you're just going to put dot append and then any number of your choice. Let's do 120. Now what this is doing is it's taking my list 1, which we have to find above, and it's appending the integer or the number in here onto our list. So now if I was to go print my list, so it's going to print my list with this appended on or added on. I quite like the word append, but it's basically just a fancy way of saying we've added this element onto your list. So if we click run, what you'll notice now is it's added 120 on, which is great. And this always adds this element on to the end of your list, so it doesn't change it to here, here, here. It's the last of the list. So you could put minus 10 and we click run. There we go, it's added -10 onto our list. Perfect. So that's just how you add an element onto your list. This is where you print it. Now we're just going to do something a bit crazy. We're just going to show you how you can reverse a list. I think this is pretty cool just because it's quite a nice way to see how different things Python can do with lists. So again, we're just going to do similar to what we did again. My list 1 dot reverse. Now you don't need to put anything in here. This can just be an empty bracket. And again, we're just going to click print my list. So again, because I have so many print statements, if you scroll up on here, it is doing every single one of those, as you can see here. And if you don't want all these things popping up, you can just simply comment them out, and again Python will just run this. It will just do the appending, it won't print the list. Okay, so I'm just gonna click run. Haha, look what's happened, it's reversed the list. And I think that's pretty cool. What you'll notice though is that it's also appended and then reversed. So say I'm going to comment this out, so Python's not going to run any of this code here that I've commented out, and I click run. It's reversed the original list I had without the appended -10. That's because I've commented this code out, and therefore Python's not doing anything with that line of code because it's commented out. Whereas if I then obviously move it back in, get rid of the comment and click run. It appends it and then reverses it. So that's quite a nice way of reversing a list. Now finally, I'm just going to show you what happens if you have two lists. So create another list and add two lists together. Okay, so we're going to create my list 2 this time, and let's say we want, I don't know, let's do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. You know, just times everything by 10. Of course, Python quite likes if you put spaces in between. I think that's just a bit of laziness for me on my behalf, not adding spaces, but it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect the code, it just makes it look a lot neater if you do this. Now, we're just going to do a print command, and we're going to do mylist1 plus mylist2. Okay, so we're just going to click here. So we're going to print mylist plus mylist2. Now we're just going to observe what happens. So let's press run. Aha. Now, what you'll notice is Python does not take this list up here. And just for the sake of it, I'm just going to copy this down here so we remember what the list is. It doesn't matter that I repeat my list here as long as I have it in this. What you'll notice is Python has gone through this list of code, and it has taken the list we have defined to start with, and then it has appended -10 on the end, and then it has reversed it, which we see in this command here. Okay, now you might think the plus command, you might have thought, well, you know, they might add numbers together, but the problem with that is when you have two lists, like here, this has 6 elements and this list down here has 7. When you start adding elements together, it isn't a case of the first element and the first element add together. That's not how it works, and that's a mistake a lot of beginners make when it comes to adding lists together, because they think it's just doing a typical addition. But what it's doing, and as you can see here, it just adds this list onto the end of this list. So similarly, if I was to say, let's just copy this, put it down here, and change that to mylist2 plus mylist1, we're going to run that, so we're going to get 2. Aha, it's taken mylist2 as defined up here, and then it's added mylist1, which again we have here after it's done the whole reversing and appending and things like that. So that's just how lists work with the addition in Python. That's just something to look out for. But it's also kind of a nice thing. It's kind of great if you have two lists and you do want to append them together, but you're not sure how to. So that's the video. This video has gone into quite a lot of depth in terms of how to create lists, the things that you can do with lists. And again, if you are completely new and you haven't done anything on lists before, just go and experiment and create a list, create a really long list, and see what Python can do with it. But what you'll notice is that if you type in list commands into Google, there are lots that you can be doing. So there's more than just what we've said in this video. This video is already long enough as it is. So if you're wanting to maybe go into data analysis and think, oh, I'm going to learn how to kind of do things with lists, then go onto Google and have a look. But hopefully this video was helpful and gave you an insight into how lists work, what things you can do with lists. And if you did enjoy the video, then please like, subscribe and comment, and I will see you all in the next video.